Hello students, so let's continue from where we had left. Chief Seattle's speech. We will ponder your proposition, and when we decide, we will let you know. But should we accept it, I here and now make this condition that we will not be denied the privilege without molestation of visiting at any time the tombs of our ancestors, friends, and children. Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished. Even the rocks, which seem to be dumb and dead, as they swelter in the sun along the silent shore, thrill with memories of striving events connected with the lives of my people. And the very dust upon which you now stand responds more lovingly to their footsteps than yours, because it is rich with the blood of our ancestors, and our bare feet are conscious of this sympathetic touch. So, again, here we see that Chief Seattle is more like a democratic leader, because when he says, "We will ponder your proposition, and when we decide, we will let you know," he doesn't say, "When I decide, I will let you know." It is the decision of the whole community that he is representing. So, what he says about the proposal sent by the white chief, that they are going to discuss over it, they are going to ponder over it, and they are going to decide. And he makes it very clear that whatever the outcome, that even if they agree to abandon this land and move further west, they should not be denied the right to visit their homeland, because he says this region, the soil, is a hallowed ground for them. It's a revered land where memories right from ages, from his ancestors, they have memories associated with each and every nook and corner of this area. And so he says that if they agree to the terms and condition of the white people, they too must not deny the right of the reds to visit this land whenever they need to, whenever they feel the need to visit this area, because this area is a hallowed ground for them, a very revered place. Our departed braves, fond mothers, glad, happy hearted maidens, and even the little children who lived here and rejoiced here for a brief season, will love these somber solitudes, and at eventides they greet shadowy returning spirits. And when the last red man shall have perished, and the memory of my tribe shall have become a myth among the white men, these shores will swarm with the invisible dead of my tribe. And when your children's children think themselves alone in the field, the store, the shop, upon the highway, or in the silence of the pathless woods, they will not be alone. In all the earth, there is no place dedicated to solitude. At night, when the streets of your cities and villages are silent, and you think them deserted, they will throng with the returning hosts that once filled them and still love this beautiful land. The white man will never be alone. Let him be just and deal kindly with my people, for the dead are not powerless. Dead, did I say? There is no death, only a change of worlds. Again, this is a very sweet and bitter speech that Chief Seattle had given. It's at the same time he is agreeing to the terms, he is willing to agree to the terms and condition of the white man, but at the same time, it's a sort of a warning. The close of the uh, speech suggests that it's a warning of some kind, that even if the red man is finished, is killed, the last man is dead, yet they would not abandon this land. They would always return, as the spirits will linger on, and the white men and the children will never find themselves alone. So, what do we summarize from this lesson? What does this lesson tell us about? It is uh, about Chief Seattle, who is a well known figure. Even today, a town in USA is named after Chief Seattle. Chief Seattle belonged to the Squamish tribe. He delivered the speech at Washington in 1854. Chief Seattle was a reputed and a prominent figure among his tribal people. In his impressive speech, Chief Seattle pursued the path of accommodation to the white settlers in the US, in the United States of Washington. In his speech, he gave a powerful argument. His arguments are powerful in favor of ecological responsibility and respect of Native Americans' land right. He thanks the white chief for acknowledging his greeting of friendship and goodwill. He praises the kindness and greatness of the white chief. He says that though he wishes to buy their land, he is willing to allow them liberty to live comfortably. He calls it a gesture of generosity. So, because the white chief is willing to buy the land, at the same time, he is willing to allow them the liberty to live comfortably. This is a generous offer by the white chief. He recollects the time when the white man began to push their forefather westwards. There were hostilities between the whites and the red people. Chief Seattle wishes that those hostilities may never return. The young men would like to take revenge, but the old tribal people are wise and would never like to resume the hostilities towards the whites. He hopes that their good father in Washington would protect them, and his brave warriors would prove to be a great wall of strength against their ancient enemies who frighten their women, children, and the old men. Then, in reality, he would be their father and they would be his children. Now, who is he here? King George. King George would be the father of the white as well as the red people. And the red people also would be considered as the children, that is the subject of the king. But he feels skeptical about one thing. He feels that the God of the white people loves his own people and hates the tribal people, the red children, and therefore cannot be their God. He has abandoned the red children. He then refers to his own God, the Great Spirit, who also seems to have abandoned him and his tribe. He complains that the God of the white people does not love his people and therefore does not protect them. They feel like orphans who can look nowhere for help. It is in this context that he remarks that they are two distinct races with separate origins and separate destinies. There is little common between the red people and the white people. He then says that the white man's religion was written upon tablets of stone by the iron fingers of their God so that they could never forget. The red man could never comprehend or remember it. But their religion, there means the religion of the red people, is the tradition of their ancestors. It continues the dreams, sorry, it consists of the dreams of their old men and is written in the hearts of their people. He further remarks that their dead cease to love them. Who's there now here? The white peoples. The white peoples dead, they cease to love them and the land of their nativity, land of their birth. But on the other hand, the dead of his race never forget the beautiful world that gave them their being. He says that the red man has always fled the approach of the white man. But the white man's proposition seems fair and he thinks that his people will accept it. He hopes that then they will dwell apart in peace. For a while, he mourns over the graves of his powerful people, but then his philosophy is that tribe follows tribe and nation follows nation like the waves of the sea. In it is his order, it is the order of nature, and the regret is useless. This is what he philosophizes. That is his philosophy, that nation will follow nation and tribe will follow tribe. It's something very natural, he says. Chief Seattle then remarks that they will ponder over their proposition and convey their decision to the white. But before the decision, he puts a condition. The condition is that they will be free to visit the tombs of their ancestors, friends, and children at any time. Every part of this soil is holy to them, is sacred to them. The dead people of his race will love these somber solitudes. He thinks that when the last red man shall have perished, these shores will swarm with the invisible dead of his tribe. In all the earth, there is no place dedicated to solitude. Solitude means loneliness. You cannot consider yourself alone. At night, the deserted streets will be thronged with the returning hosts that once filled them and still love this beautiful land. So, Chief Seattle, who's Chief Seattle? Chief Seattle is a tribal from the Squamish community. He strikes a note of reconciliation between his tribal people and the white people in a speech that he delivered at Washington in 1854. In his speech, he pursues the path of accommodation of white settlers in the United States of America, especially of Washington. In his oratorical address, he gives arguments in favor of ecological responsibility and respect of Native Americans' land rights. He recollects the time when the hostility existed between the white man and his tribal people, but he no longer wants the hostilities to return. He strikes a hope in his speech that their good father in Washington would protect them and his brave warriors would prove to be a great wall of strength against the ancient enemies. He regrets that the God of the white people has forsaken them. He feels sad that their own God is the Great Spirit has also forsaken them. He is conscious of the fact that they, the white people and the tribal people, are two different races with separate origins, separate destinies. But he strikes a note of optimism when he says that his people are likely to accept the proposition sent by the white man because it seems to be reasonable and fair. But he is a little apprehensive to the proposition and so puts a condition before they take a decision. He wants his people to have full freedom to visit the tombs and their ancestors, friends and children at any time. The deceased people of his tribal community will love these somber solitudes, and at night these deserted streets will throng with the returning host that once filled them and still love this beautiful land. So now, what is the main difference between the red man and the white man? How do we see the difference how does Seattle puts the difference about the red man and the white man? So according to Seattle, the red man is at a disadvantage owing the reduced numbers. As he had said, na, it's like a storm swept plane, So according to the speaker, Chief Seattle, the red man is at a disadvantage owing to the reduced numbers, whereas the white people are like the grass that covers the vast pastures. The tribal people are small in number. They resemble the scattered trees in the wind swept plains. Secondly, the white man does not need the friendship of the red man. He yields great power and authority. The white chief appears to be just towards the tribal, even generous to a greater extent. There was a time when the tribal people covered the whole land just as the waves covers the sea. But all that is a sad memory now. Now only few people remain, and they are being pushed towards the west, that is the desert region. What were the hostilities between the white people and the local tribals? What is the speaker's attitude towards these hostilities? The speaker recollects the time when there were fights and hostilities between the white invaders and the local tribals. The white people were pushing the local tribals westwards. He wishes that the hostilities may never return. They have everything to lose and nothing to gain against the white people. Who are they? The red people. The red people have everything to lose and nothing to gain against the white people. The younger people among the tribals may think of taking revenge against their white rulers, but it would be a fruitless misadventure. The old tribal people are wise and would never like to resume the hostilities against the white. He hopes that their good father in Washington, that is the white ruler, would protect them, and his brave warriors would prove to be a great wall of defense against their traditional enemies, who used to frighten their women, children, and old men. How does Chief Seattle strike a note of reconciliation towards the white people? Chief Seattle delivered a speech at Washington in 1854. In his impressive speech, he pursues the path of accommodation of white settlers in the US state of Washington. He puts forward forceful argument in favor of ecological responsibility and respect of Native Americans and their rights. He is opposed to hostilities between his tribal people, that is the red children, and the white people because they lead to revenge, hatred, enmity, and death. Therefore, he opts for peace and reconciliation. In the past, there were hostilities between the local tribals and the white invaders. He does not wish for the resumption of those hostilities. He expresses a hope that their good father in Washington would protect them, and his brave warriors would prove to be a great wall of strength against their ancient enemies. His brave warriors would not allow the Hydias and the Shimshians, the enemies of the red people, to frighten their women, children, and old men. What does Seattle mean when he remarks, God loves your people and hate mine? This remark forms a part of Chief Seattle's speech. It brings out an element of self-pity and anger in the mind of the speaker. He clearly says, your God is not our God. According to him, God, that is the Christian God, folds his loving arms protectingly about the pale-faced children, that is the white people, and leads them by the hand just as a father leads a child. But it is a pity that he has forsaken his red children, that is, the native people of America. These native look like orphans who can look nowhere for help. How can they feel on brotherly terms with the white, who are making more and more progress? Then another remark of Chief Seattle is, day and night cannot dwell together. What does he mean by this comment? Day and night cannot dwell together. Chief Seattle believes that the red people are poles apart from the white people. Both the red and the white are very, very different from one another. It is difficult to presume that they can put up with each other without any conflict. Taking an example from the world of nature, he says that the day and night cannot dwell together. The rays of the sun chases away the darkness and the night. Similarly, the red man has ever fled the approach of the white man, as the morning mist disappears before the morning sun. However, Chief Seattle is ready for some kind of peaceful coexistence in spite of the apparent differences. Then what is Chief Seattle's mood when he says the Indian's night promises to be dark? What does he mean to say that? Chief Seattle is rather depressed at the present scenario. His mind is clouded by dark thoughts. In a desperate voice, he says, not a single star of hope hovers above the horizon. The Red Indians originally occupied the whole land of America. But after the discovery of America by Columbus, the European nations began to occupy more and more of the land, and the red people had to move away further and further from their security, for their security. Now the situation is dismal for the native tribals. The speaker says in a melancholy manner that nobody knows where the natives will pass the remnant of their days. Of course, there will not be many. Sad voiced winds are already moaning in the distance. These are the winds of change. Grim fate is hounding out the red man. The red man is more like a doe which has been wounded by the hunter. Doe is a deer, a female deer. The speaker is apprehensive about the future. It is possible that the original natives of this land will be completely wiped out by the invading forces, and nobody will be left behind to mourn over the graves of the dead. But then the speaker checks himself and asks, but why should I mourn at the untimely fate of my people? He consoles himself by philosophizing that nothing is permanent in this world. Tribe follows tribe and nation follows nation. It is the law of nature. Then on what condition does the speaker accept the proposition of the white man? When does what is his condition, Chief Seattle's condition, to accept the proposal sent by the white chief? The proposition made by the good father in Washington is that if the tribal follow their white leaders, they will be given total protection. The brave warriors of the white people will prove to be a strong wall of defense, and their wonderful ships of war will protect the harbors against their enemies. However, the red man puts forward a condition to accept this proposal. The condition is that they will not be denied access to the tombs of their ancestors, friends, and children. Every part of this soil is holy in the estimation of the local tribals. Therefore, the white man should not exile them in their own lands. What are the salient aspects of Chief Seattle's character which come out in his speech? Chief Seattle is a well known figure among the tribal people. He is a powerful orator, and when he addresses an audience, his voice is loud and clear. His speech shows his qualities as a man and as a leader of his people. His speech is brilliant, argumentative, and logical. He is not rash or short tempered. He advocates peace and stability. He knows that anger will lead to more bloodshed and destruction. He is quite wise, profound, and philosophical. Though his mood changes during the speech, yet he does not forget his main line of argument. Here and there he speaks like a poet who makes use of apt similes and metaphor to drive home his point. Then, how does the Chief Seattle conclude his speech? In what way does he conclude his speech? Chief Seattle fondly remembers the members of his tribe who lived in this dear land in the yesteryears. They were found mothers, happy maidens, and dear children who are now living in their graves. The speaker envisions a time in the distant future when the last red man shall have perished and the memory of his tribe will have turned into a myth among the white men. It is then that these shores will be filled up again with the invisible dead of his tribe. When the coming generation of the white people will think themselves alone in the field, the store, the shop, or anywhere else, they will find the returning host who once inhabited these places. The speaker firmly says, the white man will never be alone. He believes that in all the earth there is no place dedicated to solitude. His only wish is that the white ruler is just and kind to his people. For him, death is meaningless. As he puts it, there is no death, only change of worlds. Thus, the speaker, Chief Seattle, comes straight from his heart and goes right into the hearts of the audience. When do the young men grow angry? The young red people, when do they become angry? The young men grow angry when they perceive some real or imaginary wrong done to them. They often become cruel and relentless, and even the old men and old women are unable to restrain them. When the white men began to push the tribal young men's forefathers westward, they became angry and cruel. The speaker hopes that the hostilities that existed between the tribal people and the white people earlier does not return again. The speaker wants an end of hostilities because he thinks that the tribal people would lose everything and gain nothing. So, in whole, it's a beautiful speech by Chief Seattle. We come to the conclusion of this chapter, we come to the end of this chapter, and I hope that this chapter is well understood by all. In the next class, that is when is the next class? I think tomorrow we have a class, maybe. We'll take something else. For now, we will sign off here.